Good afternoon, everybody joining us from the last session of Cartonize. I hope you've had a good day so far. I've seen a lot of attendance numbers, some good questions out there, so we're excited to bring you kind of our next session here before we close out the day. So first and foremost, thank you all for joining. Before we begin, I have a few things to review. First, the session will be recorded and available for on-demand viewing after we wrap up today. You'll receive the recorded session via email within 24 hours. Please submit questions in the Ask a Question box. We will get to as many as we can at the end of the discussion today. If you'd like to join in that final session in our Cartonize lineup, there will be a bright pink pop-up window at the end of the conversation, which will take you directly to that last session. Without further ado, let's get started. Today, I'm joined by Justin Kramer, co-founder of ProShip, and Doug Varga, VP of IT at Barrett Distribution Centers. Thank you both for joining us today. So, wanted to have a little fun with this session, and instead of doing sort of a single person talking, we're going to have a little bit of a moderated panel chat today. Both Justin and Doug, for those of you out there who may not know them, are highly experienced operators in the supply chain industry. Justin, obviously, from sort of the software perspective and maybe the vendor perspective. Doug, of course, from the 3PL perspective. So the focus of today's topic is technology and how that relates to 3PLs and sort of some of the ways that 3PLs utilize technology to further their business and accomplish the goals we have in supply chain. Before we get to that topic, I guess I'd love to just take a little pulse. Where are we with supply chain technology? I mean, everyone's familiar with the old green screen AS400s, on-prem versus cloud. I guess, Doug, VP of IT, if you want to tackle that question first, and then Justin, love your perspective, seeing a little more of a wider group of folks. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, thanks, Greg. And I'd say, as far as where things are going, I definitely think that the cutting edge continues to be the cloud, right? There's lots of talk out there in certain circles. What workloads do you repatriate and move? And, there may be aspects of that. In Barrett's experience, we've been all cloud for about 6 years now. And we really still are sticking to our mantra of not looking back, right? For us, the way that the math works is, we have more experts and effort and time to focus on the business interesting pieces of things and not the, how is it hosted? But I wouldn't look at that as an absolute statement, right? There's lots of environments where on-prem makes a lot of sense. And, and we always look at that for the use case as well, right? So but primarily, as far as, where it's been and where it's going to continue to sit for a while, in my view, it's going to continue to try to be a cloud native wherever appropriate, and layering in the on-prem for specific workloads or use cases that make sense to have that.
That makes a lot of sense. And Justin, from your perspective, kind of the vendor side, seeing maybe a wide, Doug gives us the deep perspective running IT for a large 3PL. Justin, you have the perspective maybe a little shallower but wider across some of your customer base and clients. Do you sense the same thing? Is it just a firm and definitive move towards cloud, or there's still a lot of on-prem systems out there at this point?
It's definitely a definitive move towards cloud, but I think we've seen the spigot narrow a little bit. We're not seeing as many of our customers shift as rapidly as we did in the past. And a lot of that comes down to exactly what Doug said, right? It's what is their need? As we find very large customers that are doing a lot of automation where milliseconds matter, they may choose to actually host parts of their execution pieces in the physical warehouse and in an IT closet. On the other hand, for a lot of our SMB and mid-sized customers, they're definitely headed towards the cloud unless they feel that they want that expertise in-house. I think Doug mentioned it well. Where do you put your efforts, right? Do you want to be people that are actually controlling the network and all the firewalls and all that? Or do you want to be controlling the operations and focusing all your people there? Unfortunately, you can't do both, right? We can't all be masters of everything. So I think really what we've seen is definitely a shift towards the cloud. It's undeniable. But we have seen is it's been interesting to us how that shift has been not across the board, but how individual companies that we see wherever they are inside that SMB mid enterprise stack, when they choose not to go to the cloud, I think that's a little bit more interesting nowadays.
Yeah, and I think your segmentation is probably correct, Justin, that we work with some example, fast-growing e-com brands versus legacy retailers. Legacy retailers have a ton of tech debt, right? And there's infrastructure they've built out already that exists and certainly shouldn't just be thrown away. But you think about the pace of a new technology or a startup, all cloud-based, lightning-fast APIs. Well, the newer folks on the block can react a lot more nimbly to that, right? They can plug right in. But then you think about some people that maybe, again, just use a classic example, the AS400 old school systems, that's a lot of work sometimes to get some of those kind of, I'll call it, communicating with more modern tech stack. So that's interesting. Okay, so we understand where we are in supply chain technology. We're all moving towards the cloud. That's great. Let's talk a little bit about the core topic we wanted to discuss here today. Technology and how it relates to 3PLs. And specifically, Doug, I got a question for you because this is something I hear a lot from, I've been in startup technology for quite a few years now and have worked with a couple of different startup vendors in this space. A lot of people sort of try to pitch technology and new technology as a way for 3PLs to help differentiate themselves, right? Now, obviously, if every 3PL is using a technology, that means you're not differentiated anymore. But how does new technology play into something like, say, a net new logo pursuit or responding to an RFP? Does it even bubble up to that point where you're talking about the technology you have?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Doug.
It definitely comes up, but in some ways it's not that different than the traditional picture, right? Because again, whether you're talking about new tech in the cloud, new tech on-prem, emergent, right? You can still have pieces of technology, right? Any organization and not use them well, right? So while we do definitely focus on, who are our new partners in the stack and really try to explain why, we also, it all comes down to how we leverage that portfolio, right, for our customers. So I think it's great in that it gives us a way to really explain, how Barrett might be different from other providers, right, larger, smaller, or peers, and allows the customer to make an informed decision, right? Because again, for certain customers, depending on what they're doing, they may be very focused on one aspect of that stack, right? Either because of the market that they're trying to target or pain they've experienced. So it really allows us, to have that broad conversation, which is, not just here are our tools in the toolbox, but here's how we use them.
Interesting. And Justin, from kind of a broader perspective, you guys work with a lot of major 3PLs and various folks around the supply chain industry, so to speak. Do you guys find yourselves being pulled into a lot of this type of work around sort of pursuing net new clients? Is it, like Doug mentioned, maybe something more of the 3PLs present a unified tech stack and you guys are sort of part of that? But what does your perspective kind of inform on that question?
I think Doug said it well. Just because you have a piece of software doesn't mean you're leveraging all of its capabilities. And if we expand this out, not just to the shipment execution piece, but to the WMS, the WCS, the ERP, all of the things that go into that, there are decisions that are made sometimes all the way up in the ERP that affect the way execution can occur at the scale. And really what we do see is, and Greg, you're right, we see our customers across the board come to us and say, hey, we want to execute this new feature for end customers. What can we do? And I think for any piece of enterprise software stack, they're going to offer a lot of features that you may not need day one, or that we may have coded ourselves or configured ourselves in a way that might be a little difficult sometimes to implement. But I think that's really the goal of a good partnership is, okay, we've been working with you for 10, 15, 20 years. Here's how we need to change now. Here's how we're going to do it, okay? And I think that it's the relationship at that point in time, because it is the software vendor's job to help retailers, manufacturers, 3PLs, the Department of Defense, FAA customers, all that, help them realize the operation flow they want to have for that end recipient.
Interesting. Yeah, and we start to talk about, you mentioned segmentation earlier, Justin. Of course, as you move further up the enterprise chain, the more custom things typically get as far as requirements, and everybody's business is a little bit different, and that could probably be a topic all of its own. But staying on sort of the general platform idea of, where is technology now these days in the 3PLs, let's ask the question that everyone's two favorite letters, AI. Justin, maybe just throw it back over to you. I know we've been inundated by it, but it's a technology, it's out there. Justin, to throw it over to you. I mean, my mind always goes to use cases, right? Like, okay, we got the technology, we understand what it can do these days. People are, I think, generally familiar with the idea of a large language model. Justin, you guys are on the cutting edge of supply chain technology. Do you see use cases for it, implementations yet? Where do you guys kind of stand today on the use of AI in some of your software?
Like everything, like a new spice that shows up in the cooking world, right? There are times when you use it, and there are times when you don't. When we're looking at shipment execution, definitive algorithms take up a lot of our space, right? You don't want to estimate a shipping cost. You don't want to hallucinate a label, okay? And you can't probability a PLD file. These things have to be 100% accurate. But that doesn't mean there's no space in the back end, no space in the deep tech area for AI to occur. One of the things that is very variable, very probabilistic, which is where AI is great and is probabilities, is things such as the time in transit. Here we are, beginning of spring. It's the weather is becoming very able to be talked about right now, especially if you're in the central U.S. right now, east of Texas, right? Because there's a lot of storms that are going to be coming through the next week. Somebody who travels, I watch it a lot. Well, how is that going to affect Department of Transportation? Are we going to get a hurricane that's going to hit somewhere on the East Coast that might take out I-95 or something like that, or put delays? These are all things that can be taken together with seasonal averages, and somebody, probably a company that does a lot of tracking, can create a feed that can be fed in to software like ours in order to help better understand how a customer's experience will occur once that package leaves the warehouse, and that can be fed in at the beginning at the scale when we make the decision to try to help that experience go even better. So there is space for AI, but in a lot of cases, true deterministic algorithms are still going to dominate multi-carrier shipment execution.
Interesting. Yeah, and Doug, I'm curious on your opinion on perspective on this in a moment here, but I think you said something earlier which resounds to me, which is, we live in a world of hard realities, right? In supply chain, you can't hallucinate a label. I really might have to steal that, Justin. I really like that that perspective.
I'm going to on that one, I think.
And hallucinate a shipping label. Anyway, Doug, do you guys see that? And do you see a lot of new customers you're pursuing, asking, or existing customers mentioning it? Are you guys investigating ways to implement it, even within your own work streams, to be more efficient?
Absolutely. So, I mean, we really don't get a lot of external new customer interest in it for whatever reason, right? Maybe because there's just bigger topics at hand when they're in that part of discovery. But we certainly have been participating in, monitoring the hype and so forth in the space, and where we continue to see the most value is where it's already deeply integrated into some of our other partners' technology, right? So things like robots and drones, and where you've really got these and again, to Justin's point, right? It's probabilistic things, right? So it's able to, without us thinking about it, right? We pay the bill, but we know that a robot won't run someone over, and we know that a drone is pointing us toward the right area of concern in an inventory count and things like that, right? That's where right now, or over the past few years, AI has been most valuable. Certainly to Barrett, and I would argue probably for a lot of 3PLs, it's a similar story. And I think this is in part because the vendors, for a while, because of the hype cycle, were trying to take really big bites, right? And that's great. But as we see, and I'm probably speaking less as a 3PL provider and more just as an IT service leader, probably what I'm most excited about is some of the agentic AI, right? The smaller pieces where we can really, more importantly, plug it into workflows that the average user interacts with, right? So, service case creation, a lot of our back office operations, with procurement to pay and things like that, seeing huge gains in all that. So again, it does sometimes relate to the scale of an organization and what's appropriate. But at our place, in the solid mid market, really leveraging strong partners that are embedding that technology into their products is really where we continue to see the most tangible benefit and the transformative change that we're arguably looking for. Now, 5 years out from now, no doubt I'll be singing a slightly different tune, but state of affairs right now, that's pretty much how I see it.
5 years out from today, maybe 3 AI heads
I was
talking
going
to
to
each
say,
other.
I think my avatar will be very handsome, but we'll see.
Yeah, the three of us will be out drinking a Mai Tai somewhere or whatever, doing lawn work, and our guys will be chatting about supply chain industry, trained off our emails, right? So that makes a lot of sense, Doug. And it's interesting. You talk LLMs are such a huge leap forward in technology. You can't just here you go, here it is, like go solve every problem, right? Like with any story or technology, it makes sense that you take small steps at a time. And again, in our world, we can't the consumer app can break once or twice a day, and it's not really that big of a deal. Your WMS breaks once or twice a day. That's a very big deal for a lot of different people. So that makes sense. Interesting perspective. Yeah, very curious to see how that AI develops further into the supply chain technology. I think we're seeing, to your point about the hype cycles, dying a little bit in the sense that it's becoming much more real, which is the best part of this, right? For people like ourselves who are interested in technology and actually seeing what kind of benefit they can bring. The AI conversation does bring up something that's related to this, and the idea that of course you have to train it on something, and garbage in is garbage out. And so one of the topics, selfishly one that we care all the time about in our cartonization land, is the data. How good is data? And I guess I'm curious from both of your guys' perspectives. Do you see more attention being paid to having correct, call it baseline data, all the way from DIMs of products and weights to things like information about who's doing what in the warehouse, and more real-time and accurate information across the supply chain base as it relates to then utilizing that for kind of more advanced technology? I don't know if that question makes sense, but how are you guys seeing data and sort of the baseline measurements of sort of accurate data being talked about today in supply chain?
So let me go first here. I see it from both sides here. Oddly enough, I still have a lot of customers that are just going off of the dimensional data and the dimensional or the reported weights that are in their ERPs and their WMSs. On the other hand, and those are usually older customers that have got legacy ERPs and the like. On the other hand, with the newer SMB customers we're seeing, they're starting day one with dimensionalizers and scales everywhere. Okay. And so I haven't really figured out how to segment this out, but it is kind of be more of a, if they're a tech forward company, they've got automated ways of gathering the data. If they're a legacy or a more operations focused than tech focused company, they do not usually have such good data, and they are waiting on either a manual feedback loop or something of that nature in order to correct the legacy ERP and the like to trickle that data down. That's just what I've been seeing in the last 6 months, is that heavy shift in the more tech forward companies. But that shift has been going on for the past 5 years, 6 years, in our case. Doug?
Yeah, no doubt. And, for us, data has always been almost like a raw material, right, of the product that we're producing here, right? So we've been very focused on, a lot of, various vintages of dimensionalizing tools. Been part of our DNA for a while, continues to proliferate at a rapid pace. We continue to bring in new partners in that space, and many of our customers, are close to full 100% FAI through that new tooling, because of again, traditional thought is it's very expensive up front. Well, when you multiply if you use the theory that data is a raw material, if that is not sound, right, that problem amplifies throughout the process over and over and over again, right?
Definitely.
So for us, it's been really making sure that we make those shifts, both with customers and internal teams, and conceptualization of spend and why, to make sure that we continue to get down to having really solid raw material, both for the actual active shipping goods for our customers, but then also that our analytics team have good data to go forth as they try to then maybe use AI or other technologies to project the future. Because that's where right now we still see within our customer base, large or small, the quality of a customer forecast, because it is so determinate on the consumer, the economy, the world. That still is that's the golden goose that we haven't gotten yet, right? But we continue to say, okay, well, until then, how do we better the data set and make sure that it's consistently reliable, so that we can do that analysis, through the new model when it comes forth, or what have you.
That is an amazing phrase. Data is a raw material. I am now borrowing that. I've taken note and will be using that.
I don't think I stole that from anybody, but if I did, I give that credit to the cloud, whoever I read it from. But I don't think I stole it.
We've both gotten new phrases from each other today, all three of us. That's wonderful. That's what this is all about. And that's really interesting. No, we could talk about that. I know we're running a little bit low on time here. All right, we'll move on to our final topic here for the day. And it has to do more with technology and volatility. And it's funny, we for the audience out there, we prepped on this about a month or two ago, and who would have thought volatility of all kinds of sorts and shapes and sizes would be what it is today, a month later or so. But specifically as we think about volatility related to something like carrier selection, there's obviously been a lot of changes in the carrier landscape in the past year or so. Volatility as it relates to automation providers. There has been, and I'm almost certain of this, going to be a lot of shakeups in the robotics industry in the next year or two. When the two of you think about volatility and how technology maybe can help us handle that, I guess, what is your perspective on that? Is that something that we should lean more on technology to help prepare us for that? Is technology today able to help us with that volatility? Justin, if you want to go first on this one, and then Doug, we'll close with you here to kind of end the session.
So yeah, the idea is if you've got good technology in place, the volatility in the carrier market is a quick change order. Okay. The idea is if you're leveraging a platform, which we think ProShip is a good platform that sets all the carriers on an even basis, when you decide you may want to go from one of the national carriers and you want to adjunct a hyper regional, a same day, even some of the newer national carriers that are starting to appear, that should not be a complete rewrite of your operational textbook. It really should just be, okay, here's how we're going to let these new carriers pull some of our process. That being said, as easy as you may want to put them in, you may want to be able to pull a lever to slow down what they get. And I think that should be relatively easy. Hey, we're basically looking at, from a carrier standpoint, our own little industrial revolution. Okay. We know how that caused the way everything was made to completely change across to 20 to 40 years. Well, the same thing here for the United States and carriers, where we were 20 years ago when I started, where there was the big three, and now not only do we have a big four, but we also have dozens of carriers that can help you manage how you want to execute your expectations that you've set with your end customers. So yeah, I think that we're in a great time right now for this. I think that there's a lot of options for shippers. And I think that it's really just a matter of having a good plan and not locking yourself in to make it difficult to move from carrier A, carrier B, or just add carrier Z into the mix.
Yeah, and Doug, I'll go to you in a moment here, but in my mind, Justin, it's like, okay, if you can be fast and nimble and with very low friction, move around, that also probably opens you up to economic opportunities, right? If you have all these different carriers, people lowering price after price, well, obviously switching costs can be high, and then you negate that. But boy, if you have a setup where you can just switch at the drop of a hat, someone comes along, wants to buy your business for free or at the expense of some venture capital money, I say, why not take it? Doug, any closing thoughts on this? And then we'll kind of close out the session. And
yeah, just complete agreement, right? And it really, like, because of the stack we use, right? We are a long-time ProShip customer. It has made these carrier volatility things for me strictly a commercial solve, like it is any other day, right? It's that balance between service level objective for a given brand. What are their geographies? What are their cost tolerance based on that brand? And, I don't care who it is, opening up shop, closing shop that day, over the long term, we've proven to ourselves time and again, we have the flexibility to draw from both the collection of carrier modules that they have and our ability to write our own, rarely necessary, but we have for various reasons. And again, it allows that all to be a commercial problem and, not over-indexing on the tech of it all, right? If it's, better off to use, Joe's local delivery in Brooklyn, then have at it, right? There's no technology opinion on that, as long as you give us the right, date it's supposed to happen and who it impacts. So it's really, it feels, compared to where I might feel if I was in another environment with a different set of software, I have built-in, liberation from being tied to the software on that choice.
Love that. Excellent. Well, look, we'll go to questions here. I know we have about 5 minutes left in the session here, and I'm going to take a quick peek over here. No questions. All right. Well, then, folks, I believe that's it for today. So, in closing, thank you for coming to today's session. If we didn't get to your question or you have a question, feel free to follow up to the email that we'll be sending out after this. If you'd like to join our next session, there's going to be a link here on the far right of the console that will take you there directly. Thank you all for joining, and a special thank you to our guests, Justin Kramer of ProShip and Douglas Varga of our distribution centers. Have a great rest of your day, all. See you guys soon.
Thanks, everybody.